and I'm the Director of Policy Services for AFAP, and I will be your host for this third session of this series, and the focus is on policy harmonization and public-private collaboration to improve market conditions. In terms of the background, this three-part webinar series is deemed Private Sector Viewpoints on the State of the Fertilizer Sector in Africa. And it's an informed and engaging initiative which aims at sharing insights from AFAP regional public-private dialogues that we have been holding since December of last year. The series includes the following three webinars. The first webinar, titled Financing and Trade Credit Guarantees for Fertilizer, was hosted on November 16th in 2020 of this year. The second webinar was titled Soil Health in Africa, Enhancing Fertilizer Impact and Sustainable Agriculture. And this was hosted last week on November 23rd. This is the final webinar in the series, and the title is Policy Harmonization and Public-Private Collaboration to Improve Market Conditions. So this series has actually been designed to foster greater public-private cooperation in implementing the outcomes of the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit, which is slated to be convened in Q1 or Q2 of next year. And so this third and final webinar that we're having today will focus on the importance of policy harmonization in mitigating high fertilizer prices and ensuring sustainable market conditions. It will examine regulatory options to promote the affordability and accessibility of fertilizers in the short, medium, and long term. So with that background, allow me to give you some housekeeping guidance. This is a 1 hour and 30-minute engagement being hosted on the Zoom platform. To ensure a smooth seminar or webinar, can we please observe the following? Number one, kindly keep your microphones muted. Secondly, please keep your videos turned off. And then thirdly, for general comments, please use the chat function, which is being moderated by the meeting administrator. And then for questions related to the presentation, please use the Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And it would also be helpful if you just indicate if your question is being directed at a particular presenter. So the meeting will run on the following format. First, we will have a brief round of introductions from each of the speakers. They will each present themselves. Then I will invite each speaker to deliver a 15-minute prepared presentation. And at the end of the presentations, we will ask the speakers to respond to the questions that you have inputted into the Q&A section. And then finally, I will ask for any closing remarks from the speakers to end the session. So without any further ado, I would now like to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves. I will start with Dr. John Mukuka from Actesa Comesa. Over to you, John. Is John with us, Terence? I don't see him. Okay, let's go to the second speaker. Mr. Wekam Avatim, please introduce yourself.
So Wekam Raymond Avatim. I work on the Feed the Future policy link activity in Ghana. This particular activity is a USAID funded activity that basically seeks to foster behavior change that strengthens the capacity and ability of Ghanaian stakeholders to participate in a more transparent, inclusive, and evidence-based agriculture and food security policy that leads to improved food and nutrition outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Avatim. Over to you, James. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. My name is James Mtonyi. I head FAP here in Nairobi. I'm the country manager for FAP, and I'm based here in Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without further ado, I think we can move forward with the presentations. I'm going to ask our first presenter, Mr. Wekem Avatim, who will speak on inclusive agribusiness development, empowering smallholder farmers through policy alignment and public-private partnerships. Over to you, Mr. Avatim. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for the opportunity to make a presentation on the work of PolicyLink and how it relates to inclusive agribusiness development, with focus on empowering smallholder farmers through policy alignment and public-private partnerships. So my presentation will basically give a brief introduction on the agricultural landscape in Ghana and smallholder farmers, look at what basically is inclusive agribusiness and why is it important to promote agribusiness, and look at why it's important to have a private-public partnership, then basically focus on the work that PolicyLink has been doing to promote inclusivity in terms of promoting inclusive agribusiness initiatives in the country, and then look at some of the challenges and solutions in implementing inclusive agribusiness initiatives. Basically, if you look at the agricultural landscape in Ghana, over 70% of the Ghanaian population are engaged in smallholder farmers. And these smallholder farmers are faced with a number of challenges. Some of these challenges, I would say, are limited access to finance, especially most smallholder farmers are unable to access formal credit because of the stringent policies that have been put in place to access that. We've also, smallholder farmers are also facing high levels of vulnerability to climate change and variabilities, and they are finding it difficult to be able to adapt to that. And so this has a significant impact in terms of what they can produce, and of course, invariably have effects on their livelihoods. And so we think that to solve these challenges of smallholder farmers, there is the need for a holistic approach to this. So there is the need to have government interventions, private sector engagement, and community-led initiatives if we want to address these challenges that that smallholder farmers are confronted with. And that calls for, of course, inclusive agribusiness. And with inclusive agribusiness, basically, it creates opportunities for marginalized or disadvantaged groups, women, youth, persons with disability, and smallholder farmers. It creates opportunities and empowers them to be able to have access to resources and markets to support the work that they do. And if you are able to bring all these marginalized or disadvantaged groups into the agribusiness fold, then you would notice it would invariably result in overall resilience and productivity in the agricultural sector with outcomes on sustainable and inclusive economic development. Of course, you can also notice that inclusive agribusiness also has a lot of impacts economically, socially, and environmental well-being of the smallholder farmers. Of course, we look at economic, it can result in economic growth, it can increase job creation and increase household incomes. Also, we look at socially, it would result in rural development and try to bridge the gap between the rural and urban divide. It also promotes gender equality because once the it's inclusive, then there is opportunity for women particularly to also participate and benefit from the agriculture sector. And then also social cohesion. I mean, if you have inclusive agribusiness development, the whole agricultural value chain becomes strengthened, and there is increased interaction amongst all who are within the agriculture sector. Then it also, of course, inclusive agriculture promotes sustainable agricultural practices. So adoption of sustainable practices and biodiversity conservation would improve and be, I would say, the order of the day. And we know how this would promote effective agribusiness development in the society. To do this, to be able to promote inclusive agribusiness, you need to look at the whole issue around the role of policies. And that is very fundamental if you want to address the existing challenges are identified and then to promote agribusiness. So we would need policies around promotion of financial inclusion to address the gap of inability of farmers having access to finance. And so we promote policies such as subsidized credit and other financial literacy campaigns would help. The whole issue of access to markets would also be addressed because it will facilitate linkages and eventually develop efficient value chains. And also promote climate smart agriculture and resilient farming practices, and incentivize the adoption of modern farming technologies, including subsidies. Of course, why is there the need for policy alignment if you want to promote inclusive agribusiness? Of course, it facilitates collaboration, among the various stakeholders. Of course, you have the state and non-state actors to be able to take advantage of the strengths of these particular stakeholders to run agriculture. It also ensures consistent and long-term planning, and this can lead to a stable environment for agribusiness growth. There is also this whole issue of improvement in complementarity across the various sectors, because you will notice agriculture is multi-sectorial. And so if you improve promoting inclusive agriculture, of course, all the sectors would complement each other and one another. And so it improves complementarity, and also encourages the engagement of stakeholders in decision-making. And so that is where you have the smallholder farmers amongst them. You would have the marginalized and disadvantaged in society also participating to take decisions that have impact on their livelihoods. Then finally, it enables effective monitoring and evaluation and assessments of impacts to be able to see what is working and how you can address what is challenging. So you notice there is a huge interest in public-private partnership if you want to promote inclusive agribusiness development. And so there is some relevance if you want to promote this private partnership in terms of inclusive agriculture. One, you look at, it helps in resource mobilization. Of course, the government could have the infrastructure, would have the policy environment. You also have the private sector that has the expertise and the resources. And so it would facilitate mobilization of resources. In addition, agribusiness is a risky venture. And so if you have this kind of partnership, it promotes some level of resilience because you have everyone on board and you leverage each one's expertise and strengths to be able to strengthen the system. Of course, as I said, the policy alignment is addressed within the sector. If you have private partnership, public partnership in agri business. Job creation is also something that you would realize, because the value chain is strengthened and it creates opportunities for unemployed people to be engaged in every sector of the agriculture along the value chain. Opportunities for capacity building, the whole issue of market access and distribution improves with public-private partnership. So I come to what Policy Link is doing to be able to work with government, civil society, and private sector to promote inclusive agribusiness development. So we mostly encourage collaboration among various stakeholders, and that would include the public, private, civil society, to align policies that support sustainable agriculture development. So the hallmark of Policy Link is promoting collaboration and partnerships to promote policy alignment. Also, the inclusivity approach, which invariably results in policy alignment and addressing needs that affects the smallholder farmers. So as I said, we make sure there is involvement of key stakeholders, especially the vulnerable, the youth, women, and PWDs in the agriculture policy process. Also, the whole issue of capacity building, we promote to ensure effective implementation and enforcement of policies that align with rural agriculture development goals at various levels. Currently, we're working with the Statistical Research and Information Directorate of the Ministry of Food and Agri to strengthen their capacities around data collection and dissemination in all at the national and the subnational level. And so we training the agriculture extension agents and at the agriculture staff to improve their level of appreciation of data that they collect and how it can help to inform decision making. We also provide technical assistance, basically to boost government and stakeholder capacity to effectively design and implement and monitor agriculture policies. So we have worked with IFAP to have a fertilizer roundtable discussions around the whole issue of fertilizer and how to make government, how to ensure responsiveness in the needs of fertilizers to smallholder farmers. We've also supported the Ministry of Food and Agri on the biennial review report and the Ghana Compact. So these are some of the technical assistance we have provided. Of course, the whole issue of policy analysis and research, because to develop a policy, it needs to be evidence-based. And so we provide that support in conducting thorough policy analysis and research to assess the impacts of potential policies to ensure they align with broader development objectives. We are also involved in promoting knowledge sharing and dissemination through workshops, conferences, to disseminate successful strategies and lessons learned as a way of promoting inclusivity. These are some of the examples of our co-creation approach. So in starting the work we do in Policy Link, we conduct a number of assessments, including agricultural landscape assessment, to identify challenges and opportunities in the agriculture policy space. And these findings were used to work with stakeholders in the agriculture sector to co-create work plans across 5 thematic areas. And these are fertilizer, seed, climate change, agriculture, finance, and trade facilitation. And all these brought on board all identifiable stakeholders to be able to co-create this workshop. And we are facilitating the process to implement these activities to support to improve agriculture policy space. Also, working with the Ministry of Food and Agri to revise Ghana's climate change, agriculture, and food security action plan. The essence of this particular revision is to support scale-up local technologies for converting waste, that's both agriculture and domestic waste, into organic fertilizer. If you want to promote sustainable agriculture practices, one of the ways to go is organic fertilizer production, and to support private sector to successfully scale up these technologies that would ultimately benefit smallholder farmers who will have access to these organic fertilizers. Also, one of the banes of agriculture in Ghana, we have always indicated, has been the issue of access to finance. And we've also been challenged with the whole issue of climate change, which is farmers are finding it difficult to adapt. And so through an assessment, the establishment of an agricultural insurance fund was prioritized. And this was because it was going to help reduce high agriculture insurance premiums that is making farmers unable to be able to patronize agriculture insurance. And the belief is that it will increase, by subsidizing agriculture insurance, it will increase adoption of agriculture insurance, safeguard smallholder farmer investments, and increase confidence in banks to grant loans to smallholder farmers. And so we are working with the National Insurance Commission of Ghana to establish this particular agricultural insurance fund. We've signed an MOU with them, conducted a desk study of international best practices, and then drafted a terms of reference to recruit a consulting firm to design the agriculture insurance fund. And in doing this, we bring in making sure all stakeholders in the agribusiness are part and their inputs are built into the design of the agriculture insurance fund. Also, on climate finance, we're supporting private sector to identify opportunities to raise financing from the carbon market. Currently, we have Zoom Lion in Ghana, which is a company that has already that has a project in the carbon market from their organic fertilizer production. And this intervention is basically seeks to open the eyes of more private sector players to these opportunities. We have also worked with NASTAC, that's the National Association of Seed Traders in Ghana, to organize the annual seed forum. And this is a forum that brings together stakeholders to discuss issues related to the seed sector. And so we facilitate to make sure we get everybody to participate in this seed forum, to be able to make their inputs and then participate in the drafting of a communique to be presented to the Minister of Agric to aid in decision making. This support aims to promote inclusivity, empower farmers to advocate for their needs, and to contribute to the agriculture policy process. As I said, implementing inclusive agribusiness initiatives also comes with challenges. And of course, limited access to finance is a big challenge, but we think that the introduction of innovative microfinance initiatives and farmer-friendly credit programs can support to address this. Climate change vulnerability is a big issue currently, and it can affect inclusive agribusiness initiatives. Promoting climate smart agriculture can support farmers to be able to adapt to sustainable practices that can enable them to build their resilience. Gender disparities is still a big issue, even though I said that inclusive agribusiness initiatives can bridge this gap or promote gender equality. There are still entrenched traditional norms that limit access and control of women over resources. We think implementing gender-sensitive policies and promoting women's empowerment can help to address disparities in access to resources and decision-making. Infrastructure gap is still a very huge problem, such that in most remote areas in Ghana, poor transportation networks and storage facilities have often resulted to huge post-harvest losses. And if policies are put in place that would ensure investment in rural infrastructure development, we think can enhance the efficiency of the supply chain and reduce losses. Of course, knowledge and training is also very critical, but currently, a lot of farmers do not have access to agriculture extension agents. The current Ghana agric agent to farmer ratio is about one agric extension agent to 1,500 farmers. And this makes it impossible for the agent to be able to touch base with majority of the smallholder farmers. So we think the implementation of a robust extension services program, and we could look at private sector extension service provision, can help to bridge this gap of making sure farmers have access to training on latest agronomic practices. And lack of supportive policies that address specific needs of smallholder farmers also is a challenge. And we think that advocacy for and actively participating in policy dialogues to influence the development of inclusive policies and collaborate with government agencies to align policies with goals of inclusive agribusiness, it would be very critical. And so I think that, yes, there are potentials for implementing inclusive agribusiness initiatives, and there are best practices that have been able to do this. Of course, there are challenges, but it calls for commitment to see through this process. And I think we can have a very strong agriculture sector in our society. Thank you very much for listening. And I hand over back to Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abatin, for that very comprehensive and interesting presentation. Since we're a little bit behind on time, I will, without further ado, I will ask our second speaker to take the floor. He's Dr. John Mukuka, Chief Executive Officer of the ATESA, the Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa. And he will be discussing economic resiliences through policy consistency and public-private synergies, strengthening market dynamics in agriculture. With that, John, over to you, and please also briefly introduce yourself. Thank you very much. John, you're muted. Good afternoon, John. Are you with us? Maybe he's having some Wi-Fi challenges. I think in the interests of time, I might ask our second speaker to take the floor. John, are you there? Okay, I think he may be having some Wi-Fi challenges. Can I please ask our third which was to be our third presenter, to become our second presenter, is a James Mutonyi, AFAP Country Director for Kenya. James, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see me? Can you see my shared screen?
Not yet, but I'm sure it will come up in a few seconds.
Is it coming up?
Not yet, unless somebody else can see it, but I don't see it yet.
All right, let me. I'm not sure why it's not sharing.
Yeah, we're not seeing anything. I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind people to please put your questions in the chat so we can pose them to the speakers at the end of all the presentations. Thank you. Nothing coming up yet.
Nothing coming up yet?
Yes. Does he have it? Okay, James, can Terence share your presentation and then you just prompt him through it?
Yeah, he can. He doesn't. He can. I had shared with him. Terence, you have it.
Okay.
Terence,
Okay, look, yours is coming through now, James.
it has come through.
Yes, just please put it in PowerPoint presentation, and then the floor is yours.
All right. Yes, good afternoon once again. My name is James Mutonyi. I head the FAP here in Nairobi. I'm going to present on a case study of private-public partnership on a program that we are working with here in Kenya with funding from Sustain Africa. So what I'm just going to present is a case study on how the private-public partnership is working and how it's improving market conditions, especially in the area of fertilizer, in the fertilizer space in Kenya. So just a brief introduction to FAP, a very brief introduction. FAP, we are a non-profit social enterprise, mainly working with the private and public sector to develop and strengthen the input sector. So it's not just fertilizer, but the entire input sector, including seed and technologies. FAP currently is in 9 countries, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi. I think Kenya is the latest, but we've been in Kenya, in Malawi, Ghana, Mozambique, Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and the head office is in South Africa. We focus, our main focus is what we are calling sustainable development programs. We look at issues of market development, we look at issues of enterprise development, we look at issues of market entry, we look at issues of policy and issues of finance. So in summary, we have 5 areas, 5 main service areas. I mentioned some. The area of business development, agribusiness development, where our focus is to develop the agribusiness space. Our focus has been what we call the hub agro dealers and their networks. These are the people who provide inputs and technologies right down to the farmers. We up right down to the last mile. So our main entry is through the hub agro dealer with his network of retail agro dealers. We are also involved in market development because it is our interest to have increased investment in Africa, especially in the agriculture space. So we support a number of initiatives looking at developing the market, not just fertilizer, but the other inputs as well. Then we have a unit that deals with financial development, supporting the financial services for our agribusinesses. And one of our flagship programs is the Trade Credit Guarantee Program, which is one of the financial services that we provide. You heard about our policy development. Maria mentioned it. She's facilitating this webinar, and she heads our policy. And like our previous speaker mentioned, policy is key. I mean, we have all these programs that we run, but if we don't have the conducive policies, then we may not be able to achieve as much as we would desire to. And finally, we are also into market intelligence. There's a lot of data out here. As FAP, we collect a lot of data from farmers, from agro dealers, from companies, be it in terms of prices, be it in terms of volumes, be it in terms of trends. So we have a lot of data, and so we are providing market intelligence mainly to suppliers and people who want to enter to the market so that they're able to know and learn and understand. And that kind of information is useful into growing the sector. So that said and done, I want to introduce you to the Sustain Africa initiative here in Kenya. The program is called the Kenya Fertilizer Access and the Nutrient Use Efficiency Program. Just a bit of a background for those who may not be familiar with Kenya, because this program is for Kenya. Kenya is basically an agricultural country. I mean, agriculture is still critical. When you look at the World Bank reports, we are talking about 8 million smallholder farmers in Kenya, accounting for almost 78%. Some put it as high as 85% of total agricultural production. So Kenya is basically a smallholder farmer country. We don't have large farms. Our land has been fragmented over the years. And so we have 8 million farmers. These are statistics from the recent survey done by the government, census on farmers, with up to maximum 3 hectares. And then fertilizer use by smallholder, it has been increasing over the last 10 years due to a combination of factors. I think the increase in fertilizer in Kenya has been quite high. We are doing about 800 metric tons a year, which is the highest in the region in terms of fertilizer use, and it's been increasing. I think one of the key issues has been the programs, even including government programs. Like the government has been running subsidy programs for the last 12 years now, supporting farmers to access fertilizer. We also have county governments which have also been supporting farmers to access fertilizers. But we also had a lot of development programs. AGRA has come in with programs to do with agro-dealer development. We have IFDC. We've had so many people focusing on the use of fertilizer. So basically, fertilizer use has been increasing. But when we look at the data we have, the increase has not led to the expected increase in agricultural production. So whereas we see increase in use of fertilizer, the question has been how come this has not also reflected into an equal increase in the agricultural production? So in spite of all this, as a country, we still remain a net importer of food. Maize, we are maize deficit. Some of our maize comes from Tanzania. When we have issues of production and Tanzania crosses the borders, the prices here spike. Like for the last couple of months, the prices have been quite high when Tanzania imposed a blockade on fertilizer, on maize coming into Kenya. Wheat and rice, we also import a lot of wheat and a lot of rice. Some from Tanzania, some from Asia. So we are still a net importer of food, even beyond the staples, even things like beef, we still have to get from the neighboring country. So therein lies the challenge is how come as we use more fertilizer, we are unable to produce the food and become food sufficient. In 2022, we are all aware of the global fertilizer price hikes, which brought about decreased use of fertilizer, and of course a threat to food security. It don't, even when you look at even fertilizer the consumption in Kenya for 2022 and 2023, it dipped slightly. And so what came into focus was now the need to be more efficient in the use of fertilizer. I've been in this sector for about 20 years now, 25 years working in the smallholder sector. And in the 80s and 90s, I think the message was blanket fertilizer application. At the time, we just wanted farmers to understand and use fertilizer. So we only used to talk about planting and top dress fertilizer and the amount that should be used by the farmers. So it were blanket recommendations. But with the rising cost of fertilizer prices, it becomes, you become under the microscope and you begin to ask yourself, what really needs to be done? I mean, we need to use more fertilizer more efficiently. So from the 80s, 90s, we've seen a lot of investment, and it's been increasing in investment in crop and the region for crop-specific fertilizer formulations and specialty blends. We've had the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Organization, Kenya Agricultural Research and Livestock Organization, the lead in research institution in Kenya, take a lead in terms of development of fertilizer blends and formulations. We have the companies, we know, like companies like Yara have also developed specialty blends for various crops. Companies like OCP, Elgon, many of these private sector, they've invested, including people like Mare Limited, who have a blending facility. More recently, we've had Sifao come into the market with crop-specific fertilizer blends. And so there's been quite a bit of investment. And but then again, it has not been very coordinated, in that when you go out there to the smallholder farmers, they get a lot of conflicting information. Recently, when I made a visit to Eldoret with the Yara team, they are using a fertilizer blend called formula called Yara Miller, which has increased maize production. It has almost doubled maize production at smallholder level for some farmers. But that is in only one region in the country. So the question we keep asking, why don't we have some coordinated or harmonized use so that some of these blends that are now being developed by private and public sector can get to the farmers, and everybody can be aware, and we can have a common policy to know what fertilizer or what application should be used in which area. So one of the other things that led to, as a result of the global fertilizer hikes, was government subsidy. In Kenya, it was particularly painful for private sector for the last season. I think we almost 300,000 metric tons of fertilizer came in, and it adversely affected, I mean, especially the retailers. Some studies show up to 40, 60%, between 40 and 60% of the retailers in fertilizer were lost, had their profits significantly reduced because of the government fertilizer input subsidies. So that was a result, again, of the fertilizer hikes, because, again, when you go into government, the message you get is that that was a necessary evil, because they had also to cushion farmers, and the subsidy was a necessity. Otherwise, we would have ended up in an area, in a region of food insecurity. So you can see there the trends, the retail trends from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and then the big spike in 2022 and 2023, when a bag of fertilizer we used to buy between 2,500 and 3,500, now shot up to above 6,500. And it has basically stabilized there in 2023. Okay, for farmers are buying it up to 5 because of the subsidy that is currently in place. So come in the Kenya Fertilizer Access and Nutrient Efficiency Program. This program is funded through the Sustain Africa Initiative, and it is a public-private sector partnership. I think this is one of the successful public-private partnerships that we have been involved in, and it is basically to support in the harmonization of fertilizer formulations, development and harmonization, also support in the harmonization of extension and dissemination to smallholder farmers, and also to to discuss the inclusivity of the private sector in the government in fertilizer subsidy programs. So those are the main things that the program has been looking at, the issue of formulations, so that we can have a common understanding as an industry, and say these blends should be used in this area for these crops, or these particular formulations should be used in this area for these crops, as opposed to the current situation where you've had different messages reaching different farmers through agro dealers and through agro dealers and the other retailers. And so there's a bit of confusion as to exactly what we really need to be telling the farmers and what we really need to be adapting. Now, the program is unique because it is coordinated by the Presidential Economic Transformation Secretariat, what we are calling PETS, and the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture Fertilizer Units. They're the ones who are driving the agenda of the program. It's important to note here, for those who may not be familiar with Kenya, that PETS is a very powerful, unit within government. It actually runs the president's economic agenda, and the office, they sit in the offices at State House. So they wield a lot of mobilization power in terms of bringing key stakeholders together. And so for them to be heading this unit, it in itself shows the commitment of government to engage in the private sector. And the other partners within the program is EFAP. We are providing a lot of administrative and technical support. We have the Excellence in Agriculture, Agronomy, EIA. Again, they've provided a lot of resources, and they have a lot of scientists. They're helping us set up trials. They're also bringing in a lot of technical support in terms of in terms of harmonization and some of the desk research, and bringing some of the materials and meetings and facilitating us some of the meetings. Then we have the Fertilizer Association of Kenya, FAK, a representative body of 32 fertilizer companies and producers in Kenya. They are part of this program. Then we have the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, KALO, which is the lead research institution, government institution. And finally, the other major partner we have is the Kenya National Agro-Dealer Association, was brought into the partnership. Because a lot of the times when we are talking about issues of fertilizers, the end users, like the agro-dealers, were probably left out in terms of policy decisions. And probably that was maybe one of the reasons even they were overlooked when the government subsidy program was being run. So it's an inclusive program. We're engaging all stakeholders. All stakeholders, I mean, to get a common ground on some of the issues. I mean, some of the stakeholders we're engaging with, we include the international and regional development organizations. We have AGRA, we have USAID, we have IFDC, we have Rockefeller, we have World Bank. I can't mention all of them. Recently, when we had a meeting, we had representatives from more than 47 organizations. We have some of the regional development organizations like Cereal Growers Association. We have international research institutes, ILRI. Today I was at a function of Seed Trade Association of Kenya. I met representatives from CIMIT as well, and they're part of the program. We have the leading companies, I've mentioned that. We have soil scientists, financial institutions as well, bringing in because of the issue of financing. Kenya has what we call the county government. So we also brought in the county governments and then government bodies such as Kenya Bureau of Standards. So what actually the program has done is to bring these people into high-level meetings, to have discussions, to have dialogue, to look at the data that is available, from the research institutions, and then get some kind of commonality and wage a way forward and say, come up now with recommendations with which can now be taken down to the farmer for adoption in terms of this is exactly what we are recommending as an industry. Okay, the main achievement we see now is that we have some very high-level dialogue meetings and workshops. When you are working with PETS, when PETS is coordinating, they're able to bring all the key stakeholders into the meetings, be it the minister, yesterday was the minister, be it the permanent secretaries, be it the directors, because PETS is a powerful unit organized from the president, from state. So it's a high-level dialogue. I mean, at times you may go for meetings and then you may not meet people who may be able to make decisions. And so even when you are crafting a way forward, it is subject to. But these ones, we have very high-level meetings, and they've been very productive engagements between government and private sector. I think one of the things we've seen, because we've had a few meetings next week, we've had quite a few of these meetings. What we are getting to see is that there's some more productive engagement, because there's been quite some lack of information as to government policies. I don't know. And then what has happened in the past has been what we call confrontational dialogue, where now the private sector is blaming the government is blaming the private sector for taking its jobs, etc., etc. But now we are seeing a lot of engagement, more understanding, because just to bring you into perspective on the issue of the subsidy program, the subsidy program has been quite controversial in that the government imported the fertilizer and that distribution has been done directly through the government agencies, the National Cereals and Produce Board and the Kenya National Trading Corporations that have been the main organizations that have been distributing the fertilizer. And they've left out a lot of the private sector because this has been direct distribution to farmers. Now, the hue and cry was it should have been done through the private sector. But the government's position was that this was a short-term solution on a serious crisis of increased fertilizer prices, and the farmers needed to be supported to get fertilizer. And so, as we've gotten to more understanding into the government in Kenya, it's called the bottoms-up economic approach, which many in the private sector had not even had time to go through the exact agenda, and so that they're able to engage in government, and then come to a commonality and see how they can be able to work together into some kind of halfway, so that at least the government agenda, because for the government, they were not the issue in the government was that they were not opposed to private sector taking part, but they would say private sector would have taken a long time to impact and reach the farmers, and the government has the machinery through the local administration to reach farmers, something which private sector would not have been able to achieve within a short period of time. So we've seen some achievements. I mean, in the last 3 months, this is an advertisement that ran in the newspapers the other day. Where the inclusion because of the discussions of the ongoing discussions, the agro dealers are now back into the input subsidy program, as per the advertisement that has been running. This program had been suspended, but because of the kind of the dialogue that's been going on and the engagement with government, now we are looking a shift back into having private sector now to be able to respond and provide fertilizer through agro dealers back into the farmers. So my biggest takeaway from the program, we are looking at continuous proactive engagement with private sector. This will bring about what we are calling the desired policy changes. It has to be continuous, proactive, non-confrontational. I think once there's a better understanding of what the government wants to achieve, and once there's a better understanding of what the private sector can do, and then I think we can work together in commonality and be able to achieve the outreach to the farmers that we intend to do. I hope I've not taken too much. I think I'll stop my presentation there, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, James. That was a very interesting presentation. Really appreciate that. John, you are with us. Excellent. I would like to hand it over to you without further ado, because we are running short on time.
Yes.
Please go ahead, John. Thank you. Just introduce yourself briefly, and then go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, maybe we can. Your colleague can put my presentation there. I send it to them.
Oh,
yes,
okay. Terence. Oh,
okay.
Terence, please, can you share the presentation?
Okay. Yes, my name is John Mukuka. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa, ACTESA. Our mandate is to make sure that we increase agricultural productivity for almost 90 million smaller farmers in the 21 commercial member states, and also link them to national, regional, and international markets. So, our focus now in the last all the intervention that has taken place within the commercial member states is now ACTESA to work with the private sector, with AFAP and all the private sector, and be able to to have what we call the harmonized fertilizer standards. So that's very key. This, will affect, how the government, works in supporting the private sector. We can go to the next slide. So in the last 2 years, we've been working with and we've come up with what we call maybe we can go back to the last slide, what we call the COMFREP. COMFREP is a COMESA Fertilizer Regional Program. This has taken 2 discussions that have been taking place ever since the fertilizer prices have gone up. And it's for us to make sure that we accelerate the development, harmonization of organic fertilizers framework for COMESA member states. So in summary here, what you're trying to do is to make sure that we have the standards harmonized for COMESA region. We work with the private sector in terms of the technical meetings that we're going to have. We also harmonize the common external tariff system for the COMESA. Here we are going to work with all the customs officials in all the 21 member states. And we also want to make sure that we assess the status of organic and biofertilizers, including developing regional guidelines for both type of fertilizers. So here we're looking at end result is increased productivity, where the private sector has laid response to food security. We're also looking at reducing trade costs, improved volumes, values traded of stable food increasing, and also making sure that we have an improved soil health within the COMESA member states. That's why we are going to make sure that the organics and inorganic standards that we are be part of the COMESA member states are harmonized. With that in place, using the experience of Actesa, that will make it easier, even when we have some decisions that have been made by member states that we should facilitate the bulk procurement of fertilizers. So we are all making sure that collaboration with the AFAP will work with companies to source the fertilizers within the COMESA. They are supported from that perspective. And if there are any taxation that is supposed to affect the movement of those fertilizers, is worked on. We can go to the next slide. So with that kind of harmonized system in place, in terms of organic and inorganic fertilizers, Maria, is that what we want to emphasize the public-private dialogues. For example, what my colleague John Mutonyi, what she was presenting about, this, we want to work together with private sector, so that the policies that are going to, to come up with conducive policy and the environment will support the increased investment in fertilizer value chains. We're also going to make sure that, trade fairs are held to raise awareness of the opportunities to invest, inputs, for the fertilizer companies, and also preparation and dissemination of case studies on the benefits, value additions to be gained from the investment, involvement of commercial businesses in the fertilizer, markets. So we'll make sure that these private dialogues on a real time are supported, so that we have increased investments in fertilizer value chains, improves the access to cutting-edge technology and processes in agricultural inputs provision, increased investment in fertilizer value chains. And what I talked about, when all this is in place, then it will be easy for us to support the, bulk procurement, which is from a perspective of a framework which is in place, the public-private partnership, which is real, and make sure that all the challenges that are faced by companies, we deal with this head on as Actesa. So we want to make sure we will start implementing this in the course of next year. And we also want to make sure that during the summit that is going to take place first quarter of next year, we're going to participate there. So if any other issues that needs to be implemented will be taken up by Actesa in collaboration with AFAP. I think the AFAP will be the key partner here because we have signed a 5-year MOU with them. That because we believe that through a partnership with AFAP, we want to quicken up the issue of fertilizer availability, accessibility, and affordability. I think with those remarks, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, John, for that very concise presentation. So now, colleagues, I would like to open up to some questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A section, and then I can sift through them and direct them to our speakers. We've had 3 very interesting and comprehensive presentations. One on inclusive agribusiness development and best practices for empowering smallholder farmers through policy alignment. Another one is a very exciting subsidy program in Kenya, which is emphasizing improving nutrient use efficiency. And then the third is a regional program looking at policy harmonization to accelerate availability and use of both organic and inorganic fertilizers. So I'm now going to go into the Q&A. I don't see many questions here yet. Please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A. There is a question about data. Let's see. There's a question about data and its availability, and whether there are efforts to harmonize data at the level of government. I think I'd like to direct this question to all the speakers, initially to Mr. Avatim. If USAID PolicyLink are collecting data on fertilizer use, fertilizer supply, and using this to develop some evidence-based analysis, and then how has this been used to inform government? If you could perhaps provide some examples. And then I'll also ask a similar question to James with regards to plans. I know your project has just started, but there should be some plans in place to collect data and use it to inform project implementation. So over to you, Mr. Avatim.
Yes, so that's true. PolicyLink, of course, analyzes policies to identify their strengths and to identify the weaknesses, and to use that to be able to engage government and other stakeholders to see how we can address this. Of course, this is driven by data, and this data is based on collecting information from stakeholders, and it's often inclusive. So we collect data not just at the national level, but even at the subnational level with farmers, persons with disability, and all that. So we take this data, we synthesize the data, we discuss the information of this data, basically validate the information with all stakeholders, including government. And that pinpoints as to what needs to be addressed in these particular policy areas that have been addressed, that have been identified. And so that's how PolicyLink works, to make sure there is evidence in whatever changes are needed in a policy. I agree with the questioner, there is the need for data harmonization if we want to make sure there is coordination and effective collaboration. I know there have been discussions around how can we effectively harmonize data. But the question is, have we moved beyond these discussions to see how we can work together? I mean, all sectors that collect data, how do we harmonize this data to be able to link up to addressing national issues? And I think that is where the discussion is now. And we need to find a way of working to harmonize this data to be able to use them for the benefit of the country. But where I sit, I think we haven't still harmonized most of the data that we have collected. I mean, for example, in Ghana, I probably stand for correction, but I think the discussions that have been taking place in Ghana is the need for data harmonization if we want to address concretely issues that affect the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abutin. Over to you, James.
Maria, yes, there's plan to collect data. I think from you see what we are doing now, when we began the program, then we started bringing in other stakeholders. We have a lot of data on the formal fertilizer sector, especially the chemical fertilizers. But now we've brought in other stakeholders, because when you're talking about productivity, then you also need to talk about organic fertilizer and organic fertilizer use. We'll be having a discussion with the Organic Fertilizer Association of Kenya. It's just newly formed, but they have 19 members, mainly small organic fertilizer producers. But you see, we don't have any concrete data even to know what is their production, what is the market size. I mean, it's quite a bit, because it's quite a bit of missing from the formal chemical fertilizers. You can get that kind of data. We also bring in people who are in green energy. We have a company that we have begun to collaborate with. It's called Talus. Them, they are looking into green ammonia. They're based in Naivasha. And so I think as the program goes on, we are deliberately going to be able to collect all the data that we can, so that we can be able to have some informed decisions on the way forward, in terms of what kind of support or what more investment can be done. Because, like, if we were to get a better understanding of the market for organic fertilizer, or so the issue like that, then we can be in a position to inform anybody who would like to invest in the sector. So you're right, the program has just begun. We are only into our third, fourth month. We already have our first achievement into the subsidy program, but we will be collecting data. Yes, Maria.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to now move on to, I don't see any additional questions, technical questions. Let me see. Okay, there is a question with regards to complementary inputs and to what extent these are taken into account in your programs. The question is, fertilizer is only one component to obtain increased yields, it cannot on its own provide an increase in yields. So what are the other complementary inputs that are being used or taken into account in your programs? I think I'll start with you, Mr. Abutin.
Yes, yes. So I agree with the questioner that fertilizer is just one component if you want to address issues of increased yields. Currently, what PolicyLink works on is 5 policy areas to try to see how we can strengthen those policy areas to increase agric productivity. So apart from fertilizer, we also work around the issues of seed to try to see how we can strengthen policies related to seed, so farmers can have access to quality and improved seeds. We also work around the issues of agri finance, where we have tried to understand what are the challenges with farmers' ability to access agriculture finance. And we've come out with a number of recommendations that we are working with stakeholders to address. As I mentioned in my presentation, when we came out with the priorities, recommendations from the agricultural lending assessment, one key issue came up that we needed to address agriculture insurance fund so that premiums on agriculture insurance can be subsidized so that more farmers can take up agriculture insurance to protect their investments and also to boost the confidence of banking institutions to be able to grant credit to smallholder farmers. So then we are also addressing issues of climate change, working with government to revise the climate smart agriculture action plan to promote sustainable agriculture in the country. So these are some of the complementary things we're doing to be able to boost the agriculture sector. Of course, we look at trade facilitation as well. So we more or less working around areas that can collectively boost agricultural production in the country. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Over to you, James. Use of complementary inputs in the project you're implementing.
Yes, I think when this it's very interesting that when we began to engage with through PETS, when we began to engage with the fertilizer association and the fertilizer stakeholders, the issues that came in was that fertilizer on its own does not increase production. This morning, I was one of the key presenters at the Seed Trade Association of Kenya, STAC. They have their annual congress, and I gave a speech. I gave a presentation today morning on the need to harmonize what I've been talking about. And of course, they jumped in and immediately said, "No, we have to be part of this initiative because our farmers, if we don't get the correct fertilizers, then even we don't do good business with the seed." It's the same thing again during when we launched the program early this month. We had representatives from some of the leading irrigation providers and irrigation companies in Kenya, including Amiran and Kickstart, Netafim, and all those people and the Indians who do a lot of drip irrigation systems, sun culture with their solar pumps. They all was represented, and they said, no, again, if we have to promote the issue of fertilizer and fertilizer blends, then again, it has to be complementary with all these other inputs. And so that is the direction that the entire discussion is taking. Of course, we don't want to lose the key focus on what the program can do and probably lose our agenda. But it is worth noting that many of them, we will be partnering with many of them as we move forward. Not just, I think it's also an opportune time. It shows us there's a need to harmonize, to bring in more of the other partners into such programs. Like the colleague from Ghana said, it has to be complement. I mean, for you to have production, everything has to be right. Not so perfect, but probably right. So we may also want to know who are the strategic partners and who now we can involve. Of course, again, you don't want to overwhelm farmers with a lot of information and knowledge, but we can focus on where some of these services can be. But there's great desire, and we will be working with some of these other service providers. Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I think let's now pivot to the regional level. John, there is a question around clarity, whether you're from the public or private sector. Maybe you can just briefly mention what Actesa does. And then a more specific question for you, if you can please highlight some of the existing regulatory constraints to fertilizer trade within the COMESA region. Thank you.
Okay, we as TESA, we commercial institution, but we are more on supporting the sector. The key alliance partners is the private sector by ensuring that we support them and move forward. And we are interested, in fertilizer because fertilizer policy, I think, is consistent. Needs to be harmonized like we have done on the seed harmonization. We're making a lot of progress. The access, 10 years ago, the access to quality and improved seed was about 20%. Now it's moving to over to 30%. So as you may be aware, for you to have a good yield, you need to have seed quality, because quality seed will contribute about 50% towards the over yield of a crop. And so we're trying to come in now to make sure that the fertilizer, which is very important as well, we deal with all the regulatory issues, which is a big challenge, in the commercial members. So we want to make sure that this is harmonized. The nitty-gritties, in terms of the, organic fertilizer, which is the majority, and also organic fertilizers for all the countries, so that when we support the private sector, we have a conducive environment for them to thrive. So the key challenges in COMESA is inconsistent policies. That's why we presented that we want to do the harmonized fertilizer organization. We have also got a challenge of of commercialization. So we have to make sure that we do capacity building, on program that we're doing, across the region. We're looking forward, to next year's, fertilizer and soil health summit, so that we can move on into implementing not only the harmonization, which is critical, for COMESA, because we don't have that framework, but also to make sure that some of the support that are required, for the private sector are implemented.
Great, thanks. Thank you, John. We have about 8 minutes left in the session. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. There is a question in the chat, which I would like to direct to James. The question goes as follows: Ethiopia's fertilizer sector is completely dominated by government. Is it a bit early to draw a lesson from Kenya's experience of the latest initiative of public-private partnerships in the sector? And then can you mention a specific achievement of the involvement of the private sector in the fertilizer market in Kenya? Thank you. Over to you, James.
I'm not sure how to comment on Ethiopia's position. I have a bit of I have a bit of understanding of the sector, and I know it's dominated by government. But I think it would be a good time for you to begin the discussion, because where we are in Kenya, I think when we look at the subsidy of last year, where the government brought in about 300,000 metric tons and it was all distributed, we have seen a lot of inefficiencies in that system, the distribution system. And some of the studies that have been done show that in as much as the farmers may have gotten the fertilizer at the subsidized price of 2,500 bob a bag, the kind of resources that the government used to get the fertilizer to the farmers was maybe about an equal amount of money. So it was a very inefficient system in terms of distribution. And then there was a bit of wastage in terms of delays in getting fertilizer to the farmers. So some missed out because the distribution point, the fertilizer got there when the rain, when it was too late for planting. So we've seen some of those issues when you're talking about subsidized fertilizer. And so with that in mind, I think now the government put an ear and now is more accommodating. And when you put some of those facts down, I think like what we are doing with our dialogue within the sustained program, now they tend to listen because now you're showing them facts and you are giving them an alternative that yes, this thing can still be done directly to the farmers, but at more efficiently, and farmers will benefit. And with that kind of interaction, then they listen, and then you get a response, and you're able to engage, as opposed to the confrontational system of saying no, we don't mess up the prices. No, no, no. And that's the kind of dialogue we are looking, and we are trying to look at public-private partnership. So maybe I think for Ethiopia, you may want to take a discussion with government. I think if you have a candid discussion and provide alternatives, I think that is where we'd be looking at. Even here in Kenya, I think we have other input subsidy programs which I'm working on currently, which are funded by other partners like IFAD and FAO. But then again, you have to have a clear alternative that is more efficient and less costly. And for many of us, even within Kenya, which is advanced in terms of our fertilizer industry, there are still many areas where you may not get like an agro dealer who can be able to supply. We've been working with on the case program, on the FAO FAD program, and we have had to take agro dealers who are involved in it have had to take fertilizers 50, 60 kilometers to where the farmers are, which also makes it more costly in terms of the agro dealers accessing those farmers. So it's a bit of a scenario, and it's one of the reasons why the government will say, you see, it's safer for us, it's cheaper for us to use our system, and you'll have your subsidies in place other than the private sector. So I think that is the kind of line that you may want to take in Ethiopia. For the particular achievement, yes, for Kenya, I think the fertilizer industry is achieving. It has achieved. I think the current engagement, like we are talking about now, the reinclusion of agro dealers in the in the input subsidy is an achievement because it's the engagement. I think what was lacking was transparency on both sides. There was a bit of lack of transparency from government in terms of the subsidy. Where is the fertilizer coming from? I mean, there were a bit of issues of subsidy. Maybe these are corruption deals. And then from the private sector, government was asking, will they be able to handle? Can they handle subsidized fertilizer? Who will they be accountable for? I think those kind of suspicions. But I think as you dialogue more, especially what has helped for our program is that we have the very top decision makers sitting in those meetings. And so you're able to strike a conversation, but always have at least a solution, an alternative view, and say and prove it with facts and figures that we can do this at this price with this efficiency. Then they will listen, and I think that's what I can say for now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we have 2 minutes left, and I'd like to give an opportunity to our speakers to just make their closing remarks. I think it's been a really interesting and informative webinar, particularly increased understanding of the sort of public-private interventions that are taking place in the agricultural space to improve market conditions. So thank you very much to all of the speakers. I think a key takeaway for me is that we are definitely moving away from confrontational to more constructive sort of dialogues between the public and private sector. So closing remarks, please, in this order: James, John, and then Mr. Avatin. Thank you so much. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Maria. I thank you for involving me in this webinar. I think I've also learned a lot from my other colleagues. What has come out clearly with our engagement with government is that government is willing to listen government is willing to support, and government is willing to put in resources, as long as the farmers are going to benefit. I think when we look at our engagement and some of I talked about suspiciousness from government saying these people make millions of shillings, etc., etc. But as long as the farmers are going to benefit, and it doesn't say they appear to be exploitative a business environment, then I think it's the way to go. Be more transparent with government, engage them more, have more discussions, field, etc. That is my takeaway, and it should be continuous. It's something that should be continuous, and to the extent that when you have other functions other than whatever you're doing, which may be, please also just probably invite them to sit in and be part of some of the discussions on other issues that may not be directly concerning, that may not be directly related to the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Over to you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I think from the COMESA point of view is that the fertilizer harmonization has been long overdue, and we want to do that, in the course of next year, so that we'll be able to bring in governments. For example, the example that I've been given on Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is part of COMESA. So I think through that harmonization, the domestication, then we'll bring in the engagement of the public officials, in such countries, so that we are on the same page, in as far as the fertilizer industry is concerned for the COMESA member states. So we're looking forward to make sure that this comes to fruition and be able to move the fertilizer industry to another level. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Last but not least, Wekem, go ahead, please.
Right. So from my end, I think that if we want to drive prosperity through inclusive agribusiness development, it's very important to empower smallholder farmers through strategic policy alignment and a dynamic public-private partnership for a sustainable and thriving agricultural future. I think that would be the way to go. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think that's a great note to end on. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to participate in this webinar this afternoon, and I wish you a good afternoon further. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.